It glows, it bounces, it eats people. That's right, we are doing Monster Blood, the original Goosebumps #3. Grab your books and let's get Goosebumps. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Let's Get Goosebumps. I am Ryno, and this week we are going to be doing, I say this week, but we do like multiple a week sometimes. So this episode, we are going to be doing Goosebumps #3, Monster Blood. This is one that I loved when I was young. I loved so many of these. I don't know. I don't have to say that every time. But it's crazy to think that there are 3 other sequels of this. So this goes all the way up to Monster Blood 4, which I believe is actually the very last of the original series of Goosebumps. So we're just going to dive right in. No reason to beat around the bush. This was published in September of 1992. It is 128 pages. I'm going to give you the cover tagline here. It's a monster blood drive. That does not make any sense in context to the story or what happens or anything. They don't even explain the name of Monster Blood, but cover art was by Jim. My friend said Jacobus. I've been saying Jacobus. I do not know how to pronounce names. I apologize. I should know better. I will look that up, and this is going to be a name I'll commit to memory for the rest of my life. But there is an episode of this book to go with the show and a sequel episode that's an original episode of the TV show that doesn't follow any one of the plots of the book. So that's really interesting. But so the back of the book says, blood, blood everywhere. While staying with his weird great aunt Catherine, Evan visits a funky old toy store and buys a dusty can of Monster Blood. It's fun to play with at first, and Evan's dog, Trigger, likes it so much he eats some. But then Evan notices something weird about the green, slimy stuff. It seems to be growing. And growing, and growing, and all that growing has given the Monster Blood a monstrous appetite. Reader beware, you're in for a scare. So, this one, what was interesting, is written in the third-person perspective again, but I feel like it felt a little more consistent than Stay Out of the Basement. So let's just dive right in. We're going to go in with our plot summary and have some reading. So if you've got your book, like I said, grab that book. So our main character is 12-year-old Evan Ross, who is being left in the care of his great-aunt Catherine while his parents search for a new home in Atlanta, Georgia. Catherine is 80 years old, and is a highly eccentric person. She laughs at her own jokes, she argues with her cat, and she carries a butcher knife around as one does. She seems to always be doing something with meat in this book. I don't understand this lady's obsession. A lot of cleavering and whatever, but she's also deaf. That's important to the story, and she does not know sign language and can't read lips. I feel like you get a really strong perception of who Catherine is, like, really, really quick in the book. I just want to read this tiny, small encounter that now, as a homosexual adult, I can relate to when it comes to older people being kind of obsessed with the love life of children. So we're going to go to the middle of page 10. So he's I don't know where I told myself to stop. Sorry. So he's a good boy, not a troublemaker, Catherine asked Evan's mother, Mrs. Ross nodded, looking at Evan. Where shall we put his suitcase, she asked. I can tell by looking he's a good boy, Catherine said. She reached out and grabbed Evan's face, her big hand holding him under her chin, her eyes examining him closely. Good-looking boy, she said, giving his chin a hard squeeze. He likes the girls? Still holding his chin, she lowered her face to his. You've got a girlfriend? She asked, her pale face right above his, so close he could smell her breath, which was sour. Evan took a step back, an embarrassed grin crossing his face. No, not really. Yes? Catherine cried, bellowing in his ear. Yes, I knew it, she laughed heartily, turning her gaze to Evan's mother. The suitcase? Mrs. Ross asked, picking up the bag. He likes the girls, huh? Catherine repeated, still chuckling. I could tell, just like his father. His father always liked the girls. Evan turned desperately to his mother. Mom, I can't stay here, he said, whispering even though he knew Catherine couldn't hear. Please don't make me. Hush, his mother replied, also whispering. She'll leave you alone, I promise. She's just trying to be friendly. He likes the girls, Catherine repeated, leering at him with her cold blue eyes again, lowering her face close to Evan's. Mom, her breath smells like Trigger's, Evan exclaimed miserably. Evan, Mrs. Ross shouted angrily, stop it. I expect you to cooperate. That's, Trigger is the dog, so she's got dog breath here. But anyway, so I always found it weird when I was a kid, and the things that adults want to talk to kids about, like always being like, "Oh, you got a girlfriend yet, ma'am?" No, I can barely tie my shoes. Please back up. And even though Evan doesn't end up having even though Evan ends up having a friend that's a girl, I never feel like it's like a romantic thing, which I also appreciated about this book. Just kind of like a pure friendship. But I am sure I am 100% wrong and just reading into representation that I want to be there. So anyway, I'm also now realizing for the first time as I was making my notes at this point that the main character was a boy instead of a girl, because we've had two in a row of a girl. But I do like how the books have both male and female characters at the center of the story. And I know that Goosebumps was originally intended for female audiences, which is also great because I feel like horror tends to lean toward like men and minimalizing women, and but I like how it balances the two so far, and I haven't felt like the male characters have ever been like inherently better than the females or anything like that. So it's usually, if anything, it's usually the men that would die first in these sort of books. But I digress. So Evan's mother leaves the family dog Trigger with Evan to help keep him company, and she gives him $10 to buy something nice. $10 whole. I feel like when the mom goes to leave, it very much felt how I felt when I was used to sleep over my dad's house when I was a kid. And my dad's like a good person, everything like that, but I just did not like sleeping over his house. So I feel like this hit a bit close to home, where I always be like, "Mom, I'm sick. Mom, take me with you, Mom." So it's kind of like it was like bringing up childhood trauma, not trauma, but emotions. So I'm going to read another part here. It is on page 14, and we're just going to read through the middle of page 15. "I'm late. Don't want to miss my plane," she said. This is the mom. She gave him another hug, longer this time. Then she took a $10 bill from her pocketbook, first of all, pocketbook. I love that word. Pocketbook, and stuffed it into his shirt pocket. "Buy yourself a treat. Be good, honey. I'll hurry back as fast as I can." I don't know why I just made her like an old-timey lady, but okay, bye, he said, his chest feeling fluttery, his throat dry as cotton. The smell of her perfume momentarily drowned out the mothballs. He didn't want her to leave. He had such a bad feeling. "You're just scared," he scolded himself. "I'll call you from Atlanta," she shouted as she disappeared down the stairs to say goodbye to Catherine. Her perfume disappeared. The mothballs returned. Trigger uttered a low, sad howl, as if he knew what was happening, as if he knew they were being abandoned here in this strange house with this strange old woman. Evan picked Trigger up and his nose kissed his cold black nose. Putting the dog back down on the worn carpet, he made his way to the window. He stood there for a long while, one hand holding the curtains aside, staring down at the small green yard, trying to calm the fluttering in his chest. After a few minutes, he heard his mother's car back down the gravel drive. Then he heard it roll away. When he could no longer hear it, he sighed and plopped down on the cot. "It's just you and me now, Trigger," he said glumly. Trigger was busily sniffing behind the door. Evan stared up at the walls of old books. "What am I going to do here all day?" he asked himself, propping his head in his hands. No Nintendo, no computer. He hadn't even seen a TV in his great-aunt's small living room. What am I going to do? Sighing again, he picked himself up and walked along the bookshelves, his eyes scanning the titles. There were lots of science books and textbooks he saw, books on biology and astronomy, ancient Egypt, chemistry texts, and medical books. Several shelves were filled with dusty, yellowed books. Maybe Catherine's husband, Evan's great-uncle, had been some sort of a scientist. "Nothing here for me to read," he thought glumly. He pulled open the closet door. "Oh," he cried out as something leapt out at him. "Help! Please help!" Everything went black. "Help! I can't see!" Evan screamed. Evan staggered back in fear as the warm blackness crept over him. It took him a few seconds to realize what it was. His heart was still throttling in his chest. He reached up and pulled the screeching black cat off his face. I read a little farther than page 15, but also, Evan has a computer in 1992. Like, get it, Evan. I mean, I had used a computer in 1992 in my second grade classroom, but they were technically a little outdated and had those like screens where it was just like green, and then you could like print on like a dot matrix printer, and you'd make like it would take forever, and it'd make the noise, and it would make a happy birthday banner or like a skull or something like that. Everyone got banners and cards from me that year, and now that I'm thinking about it, I remember having like one of those huge floppy disks too, and not like a teeny floppy disk. We're talking the big literal floppy disk. And I remember writing like a book in that class. Truly one of the best school years, honestly, with an incredible teacher. Thank you, Mrs. Taselli. If you ever happen to come across this, you still to this day, you Thank you for everything that you did. Thank you, all teachers out there. So back to the book here. So after just a few minutes of being in the house, Trigger and Catherine's cat, Sarah Beth, get in a fight, which prompts Catherine to demand that the dog stay outside. She created a pen for him before Evan's arrival, suspecting there might be some issues. Evan decides to take Trigger for a walk out in the neighborhood. He meets a girl his age named Andrea, or Andy if she prefers. I immediately like Andy because kind of the way she speaks, I feel like it's very like whimsical. So I am going to read to you from from page 25, chapter 25. Imagine. Reading from page 25. Okay. So Evan, okay, so he meets this girl. I'm just going to pick up at the top of page 25. For a couple of weeks, Evan added, I'm staying with my aunt. For a couple of weeks, Evan added, I'm staying with my aunt. Actually, she's my great aunt. What's so great about her, the girl cracked. Nothing, Evan replied without laughing. For sure. Trigger sniffed at a bug on a fat brown leaf. Is that your bike, Evan asked, pointing to the red BMX bike laying on the grass behind her. Yeah, she replied. It's cool, he said. I have one like that. I like your dog, she said, eyeing Trigger. He looks real stupid. I like stupid dogs. Me too, I guess, Evan laughed. What's his name? Does he have a stupid name? She bent down and tried to pet Trigger's back, but he moved away. His name's Trigger, Evan said, and waited for her reaction. Yeah, that's pretty stupid, she said thoughtfully, especially for a Cocker Spaniel. Thanks, Evan said uncertainly. Trigger turned to sniff the girl's hands, his tail wagging furiously, his tongue hanging down to the ground. I have a stupid name too, the girl admitted. She waited for Evan to ask. What is it? He said finally. Andrea, she said. That's not a stupid name. I hate it, she said, pulling a blade of grass off her leggings. Andrea. She stretched the name out in a deep, cultured voice. It sounds so stuck up, like I should be wearing a corduroy jumper with a prim white blouse walking a toy poodle, so I make everyone call me Andy. Hi, Andy, Evan said, petting Trigger. My name is... Don't tell me, she interrupted, clamping a hot hand over his mouth. She certainly isn't shy, he thought. Let me guess, she said. It's a stupid name, too, right? Or... Is it a stupid name, too? Yeah, he nodded. It's Evan. Evan's stupid. She laughed. That's really a stupid name. He felt glad that he made her laugh. She was cheering him up, he realized. A lot of the girls back home didn't appreciate his sense of humor. They thought he was silly. What are you doing, she asked. Walking, Trigger, exploring the neighborhood. It's pretty boring, she said. Just a lot of houses. Want to go into town? It's only a few blocks away. She pointed down the street. Evan hesitated. He hasn't told his aunt that he was going into town. But what the heck, he thought. She wouldn't care. Besides, what could possibly happen? Things always go well when that ends a chapter. So the two of them head into town, and they enter this old toy store that's called Wagner's Novelties and Sundries, a place that I wondered at this point in the book if it would show up in one of the other books down the road, sort of like Connecting Thread or something. Only time will tell. They used to do that sort of thing on Are You Afraid of the Dark, I feel like. It was the Vava Vink he would show up. But so at this toy store, Evan finds a tin can of Monster Blood. Okay, so I have always, for some reason or another, thought that Monster Blood came in a yellow Play-Doh-like container. And here's how it's described in the book. It's on page 31. He was about to leave when something caught his eye. It was a blue can, about the size of a can of soup. He picked it up, surprised by how heavy it was. Bringing it close to his face to examine it in the dim light, he read the faded label, Monster Blood. Below that, in smaller type, it read, Surprising Miracle Substance. Hey, this looks cool, he thought, turning the can around in his hand. He suddenly remembered the $10 his mother had stuffed into his shirt pocket. He turned to see the store owner standing in the doorway, his dark eyes wide with anger. What are you doing back here? He bellowed. That was me bellowing. I feel like it was more Santa Claus than anything. But when Evan tries to buy the Monster Blood, the shopkeeper tries to say no, but Evan insists anyways. The shopkeeper reluctantly sells it to him for $2 whole. Evan and Andy take the can to Catherine's house. Catherine grabs the Monster Blood can. She reads the label, mutters something Evan can't hear, and then she hands it back to Evan and whispers, "Be careful." Ominous. Evan and Andy go up to Evan's bedroom to open up the can, and I want to read this part too because there was because they were in the Sundries place, they specifically mentioned magic sets. And then there's this bit in here on page, where are we? Page 36. Hey, look at these old books on magic stuff, Andy exclaimed. I wonder why your aunt has all these. She pulled one of the heavy old volumes from the shelf and blew away a layer of dust from the top. Maybe your aunt plans to come up here and cast a spell on you while you're sleeping and turn you into a newt. Maybe, Evan replied, grinning. What is a newt, anyway? Andy shrugged. Some kind of lizard, I think. She flipped through the yellowed pages of the old book. I thought you said there was nothing to do here, she told Evan. You could read all these cool books. Excuse me, all these cool book. Yeah, the one book. Thrills and chills, Evan said sarcastically. Replacing the book on the shelf, Andy came over to the desk and stood next to Evan, her eyes on the can of Monster Blood. Open it up. It's so old. It's probably all disgusting and rotten. I hope so, Evan said. He picked up the can and studied it. No instructions. Just pull the top off, she said impatiently. He tugged at it. It wouldn't budge. Maybe you need a can opener or something, she said. Very helpful, he muttered, studying the label again. Look at this. No instructions, no ingredients, nothing. Of course not. It's monster blood, she exclaimed, imitating Count Dracula. She grabbed Evan's neck and pretended to strangle him. He laughed. Stop. You're not helping. He slammed the can down on the desk and the lid popped off. Hey, look, she cried. She let go of his neck, and they both peered inside the can. I wrote in the notes something is going on here with magic sets at this point, but I know there is a book coming up with a magician's rabbit on the cover. I think that's like Bad Hair Day, so I was thinking maybe that stuff would show up again, but as of right now, I legit have no idea. So no spoilers out there if some of it does, but I feel like if it doesn't, that's a missed opportunity, but it would be fun. So they open up this monster blood. They find it cool to the touch. The substance glows in the dark, stretches, bounces, and I'm like, where can I buy this? Soon after playing with it, they realize the monster blood stains the walls and floors, so they take it outside. They bounce the monster blood too close to Trigger, and he eats it because anyone with a dog and Goosebumps is an awful pet owner, is what I've decided. Although I will say that Evan is better than Amanda and Josh in Welcome to Dead House. I'll give him that. So this whole thing where like Trigger eats the monster blood, that happens on page 42, and it is not until page 46 that we even know what happened to the dog. If he passed away or if he got sick, or they're just so like casual about it. Hold on. Where am I trying to... Sorry, I wrote a confusing note to myself in here. Yeah, okay. So here's where I'm going to read from. It's page 46. Downstairs, he hurried through the kitchen where Catherine appeared to be arguing with Sarah Beth, ran out the back door, then jogged to the backyard to get Trigger. Hey, Trigger, but the dog was asleep, lying on his side in the center of his run, gently snoring. Don't you want to go to Andy's house? Evan asked quietly. Trigger stirred, but didn't open his eyes. Okay, see you later, Evan said. He made sure Trigger's water bowl was filled, then headed to the front of the house. He was halfway down the next block, walking slowly, thinking about his parents so far in Atlanta, when a voice called out, "Hey, you!" And two boys stepped into the sidewalk in front of him, blocking his way. So this is on the way to meet Andy. That's when Evan encounters these two awful twins. I don't know why I put a bookmark in there. I feel like I was supposed to read to that point. So I might have missed something in there, but I don't think it's like devastating to the plot. But anyway, these two awful twins, it's Rick and Tony Bamer, and they're just basically going to jump him until Andy shows up. Evan is saved from being beaten up, but Andy is shoved to the ground, and the twins steal her bike. She's got to go home, clean up her cut, so now Evan has to go back to Catherine's, and this is when we start to learn that the monster blood is growing. So on page 53, we are looking for the blue container. The blue container of monster blood caught his eye. He walked over to the bookshelf and picked up the can from the middle shelf. He pulled off the lid. The can was nearly full. I guess Trigger didn't eat it that much, he thought, feeling a little relieved. Trigger! He'd forgotten all about him. The poor dog must be hungry. Putting down the monster blood, Evan bombed down the stairs, leaning against the banister and taking the stairs 3 at a time, then running full out. He practically flew to the dog run at the back of the yard. Trigger! Hey, Trigger! He called out. Halfway across the backyard, Evan could see that something was wrong. Trigger's eyes were bulging. His mouth was wide open, his tongue flailing rapidly from side to side, white spittle running down his chin, hair, and to the ground. Trigger! The dog was gasping hoarsely, each breath a desperate, difficult struggle. He's choking, Evan realized. As Evan reached the dog run, Trigger's eyes rolled back and the dog's legs collapsed under him, his stomach still heaving, the air filled with loud, hideous gasps. My God, this is a nightmare. So this thing is like, yeah. So this is when, like, so the dog's okay, first of all. Evan begins to realize that Trigger is getting bigger every day and that the monster blood is still expanding and growing as well. It outgrows every container he puts it in. And now it's like warm to the touch and bubbles and like kind of breathes and stuff. You know, the normal stuff that Gak does. Evan visits Andy one evening to get her to take some of the monster blood because it's grown so much he can't keep it all. And on his way home, the twins show up again and attack him. Punch him in the stomach and in the face. Page 82, I wrote, awful kids. I feel like I am skipping over something. Oh, he doesn't even take the dog to the vet until page 70. I marked it. Page 70. The dog ate that stuff on like page 43, right? Get out of here. You don't deserve to have a dog. So I must have just left all this out of my notes. Sorry, I'm like, oh, they try to like take the dog. That's the crazy part. Like, they're just like, my dog now. And I'm like, these kids are like sociopaths out of a Stephen King book. Like the kid in It or something like that. It's insane. So where am I? It said page 82, but I didn't put a marker in my book here. So I think it was supposed to be 72. But anyway, these kids are awful. Anyway, they try to take the dog, whatever. Evan has bigger fish to fry. The monster it's still growing. It's out of control. He returns home, puts the monster blood in a tub in his great aunt's basement. And I do have to say that the description of him going into the basement really sort of like captured that uneasy, borderline panic feeling that I used to have as a kid. And honestly, still kind of get as an adult. It's just like, monsters live in the basement. Yeah. We all agree on that, and it's like your senses are all heightened and everything. But I want to read the little part on page 90 where he says, struggling to keep from spilling it, he made his way into the dark house. He paused at the door to the basement steps, silently setting the heavy bucket down on the linoleum floor. He clicked the light switch on the wall. Somewhere downstairs, a dim light flickered on, casting a wash of pale yellow light over the concrete floor. There's got to be something to put this stuff in down there, Evan thought. Hoisting up the bucket, he made his way slowly, carefully down the steep, dark stairway, leaning his shoulder against the wall to steady himself. Waiting for his eyes to adjust to the pale light, he saw that the basement was one large room, low-ceilinged and damp. It was cluttered with cartons, stacks of old newspapers and magazines, and old furniture, and appliances covered in stained, yellowed bed sheets. Something brushed his face as he stepped away from the stairs. He uttered a silent cry, and dropping the bucket, raised his hands to swipe at the thick cobwebs that seemed to reach out for him. They clung to his skin, dry and scratchy, as he frantically pulled at them. He suddenly realized it wasn't the web that was moving against his cheek. It was a spider. With a sharp intake of breath, he brushed it away, but even after he saw the insect scuttle across the floor, he could still feel its prickly feet moving on his face. Moving quickly away from the wall, his heart pounding now, his eyes searching the open wooden shelves hidden in the shadow against the far wall, he stumbled over something on the floor. Oh! He fell head first over it, throwing his arms forward to break his fall. A human body! Someone lying there under him? No. Calm down, Evan. Calm down, he instructed himself. He pulled himself shaky to his feet. It was a dressmaker's dummy he had stumbled over, probably a model of Catherine when she was younger. He rolled it out of the way as his eyes searched the shadowy room for a container to store the monster blood. What was that long, low object in front of the work table? Moving closer, he saw that it was an old bathtub, the inside stained and peeling. It's big enough, he realized, and quickly decided to store the green gunk inside of it. With a loud groan, he hoisted the bucket onto the side of the old tub. His stomach muscles were still sore from the punch he had taken, and the pain shot through his body. He waited for the aching to fade, then tilted the bucket. The thick green substance rolled out of the bucket, hit the tub bottom with a sickening soft plop. Evan set the bucket aside and stared down at the monster blood, watching it ooze, spreading thickly over the bottom of the bathtub. To his surprise, the tub appeared nearly half full. How fast was this stuff growing? He was leaning over the tub, about to make his way back upstairs when he heard the cat screech. Startled, he let go of the side of the tub just as Sarah Beth leapt onto his back. Evan didn't have time to cry out as he toppled forward over the edge of the tub and into the thick green gunk. Yeah, so Sarah Beth, she pounces on Evan from behind and he falls into that tub. The monster blood sucks and pulls him in, and eventually he's able to free himself. Honestly, I am imagining the scene from Ghostbusters 2 when Dana is drawing the bath for Oscar and it comes alive, and it's both one of those things where you're like, I want to touch it, but I don't want to drown in it. The next morning, he tries to tell Aunt Catherine about the monster blood by writing her a note, but she laughs at him out loud, then whispers, I told you to be careful. Typical adult, am I right? Evan and Andy try to make the monster blood, take the monster blood back to the store, but find that it has closed permanently. They return to Catherine's home and put the monster blood in a trash can with a latch on it. Catherine comes out of the house and tells Evan that his mother has sent a telegram. A telegram. That is right. I did not know people sent telegrams in 1992. But it's a telegram that says she's going to pick him up that afternoon. In excitement, Evan runs to Trigger and finds that the dog has doubled in size again. When he opens Trigger's pen, Trigger runs out and down the street, and Evan tries to chase the dog, but accidentally knocks over that can of monster blood. And this is when it gets real. The monster blood, like, comes alive. I'm imagining Terminator 2, like the T-1000 sort of kind of like coming up when it's like becoming a person. Like a person, but not a person. So I feel like there's like a great classic monster movie Frankenstein moment here on page 108. 108. Let us get to 108. The monster blood changed direction, still bouncing and quivering, leaving white stains on the grass like enormous round footprints. It's alive, Andy screamed, her hands pressed against her cheeks. Oh my God, it's alive! What can we do? What can we do? Evan didn't recognize his own terrified voice. It's catching up, Andy screamed, pulling him by the hand. Run! I really enjoyed this book. So I'm not done yet, obviously, but so the kids rush like toward the house, or I'm sorry, I skip. No. Yeah, okay. So like I guess I forgot to write a little part in here, but Catherine comes out, she sees what's going on, and she's just like screaming, and then the kids rush into the house after because the blob goes in the house after Catherine, and Catherine tells Evan and Andy to run and save themselves, and that she created the monster blood, and she should die for it. So Evan, recalling her muttering something over the can of the monster blood, accuses her of putting a spell on the monster blood to harm him, and Catherine admits it, says that she made her do it, and she points in Andy's direction, and here is where it just gets wild. And so I'm going to read this bit here from chapter 26 on page 117, because my gosh, it is like quite a turn. Andy? Was Aunt Catherine accusing Andy? Evan spun around to confront Andy, but Andy turned too, and Evan realized immediately that his aunt wasn't pointing at Andy. She was pointing past Andy to Sarah Beth. Standing in the doorway to the living room, the black cat hissed and arched its back, her yellow eyes flaring at Catherine. She did it. She's the one, Catherine declared, pointing frantically. The enormous glob of green monster blood bounced back, retreated a step as if stung by Catherine's words. Shadows shifted inside the glob as it quivered, catching the light filtering in through the living room window. Evan stared at the cat, then turned his eyes to Andy. She shrugged, her face frozen in horror and bewilderment. Aunt Catherine is crazy, Evan thought sadly. She's totally lost it. She isn't making any sense. None of this makes sense. She's the one, Catherine repeated. The cat hissed in response. The glob bounced in place, carrying the unmoving Bamer brothers inside. Oh yeah, it ate the twins. I left that part out. Yeah. Murder. Oh, look, Evan cried to Andy as the black cat suddenly raised up on its hind legs. Andy gasped and squeezed Evan's arm. Her hand was as cold as ice. Still hissing, the cat grew like a shadow against the wall. It raised its claws, swiping the airs, its eyes closed, and it became consumed in darkness. No one moved. The only sounds Evan could hear were the bubbling of the green glob and the pounding of his own heart. All eyes were on the cat. It rose up, stretched, and grew. And as it grew, it changed its shape, became human, with shadowy arms and legs in the eerie darkness. And then the shadow stepped away from the darkness, and Sarah Beth was now a young woman with fiery red hair and pale skin and yellow eyes, the same yellow cat eyes that had haunted Evan since he'd arrived. The young woman was dressed in a swirling black gown down to her ankles. She stood blocking the doorway, staring accusingly at Catherine. You see? She's the one, Catherine said quietly now, and the next words were intended only for Sarah Beth. Your spell over me is broken. I will do no more work for you. Sarah Beth tossed her red hair behind a black cloaked shoulder and laughed. I'll decide what you'll do, Catherine. No, Catherine insisted. For 20 years you've used me, Sarah Beth. For 20 years you've imprisoned me here, held me in your spell, but now I will use this monster blood to escape. Sarah Beth laughed again. There is no escape, fool. All of you must die now. All of you. Like, girl, what is going on? So apparently, like, Sarah Beth, like, was like, had like, you know, Catherine under these spells, and that Sarah Beth like took away her hearing and to make her more dependent on Sarah Beth. And she said it all ends here, however, because she is going to throw herself into the monster blood. So Catherine's gonna end it all. Sarah Beth is like, well, the kids are going to die regardless, so you do you, because they know too much. So Sarah Beth commands the monster blood to attack Evan and Andy, but before it can move, Trigger rushes in and pushes Sarah Beth into the monster blood. Remember, Trigger's huge at this point. Trigger immediately shrinks back to normal size, and the monster blood shrinks to a tiny drop, freeing everything it swallowed, except for Sarah Beth, who's nowhere to be seen. I thought the twins were definitely going to be dead because they start breathing after a second, but it's still a little spooky. So like on page 125, when they fall out of the monster blood, as it shrunk, the Bamer brothers fell to the floor. They didn't move. They lay face down in a crumpled heap. Their open eyes stared lifelessly. They didn't appear to be breathing. Then one blinked. The other blinked. Their mouths opened and closed. Oh, one of them uttered a long, low groan. Then, pulling themselves up slowly, they both looked around the room, dazed. The trapped robin had also fallen to the floor, chirping furiously. It flapped its wings wildly and fluttered about the room in a panic until it found the open living room window and sailed out. Endings. And then the mother shows up just as everything is settled down. Curious why the Bamer kids came running out of the door like they did, and Catherine, who has now regained her hearing, takes her to the kitchen to tell her the whole story. Evan and Andy say their goodbyes. They promise to keep in touch, and there is the oldest sentence ever on page 128. I'd like to write to you, Evan said, suddenly feeling awkward. Yeah, good, Andy replied, brightening. And my dad has a phone credit card. Maybe I could get your number and, call you. Yeah, great, Evan said. Could I ask one small favor, Andy asked. Yeah, sure, Evan replied, curious. Well, it's going to sound strange, Andy said reluctantly, but can I have the little bit of monster blood that's left? Sort of as a memento or something? Sure, okay with me, Evan said. They both turned their eyes to where it had come to rest on the carpet. Hey, Andy cried in surprise. It was gone. What the heck is a phone credit card? Like a calling card? I don't understand. It's fine. I will say I very, very much enjoyed this book. I felt like it was a lot more from this one. Like, I don't know, like maybe someday if I ever succeed in directing, or if I ever put that wanton thing to bed, I would make this into its own movie. I think it is a solid, like, fun, scary, maybe Netflix original movie. But it was very cinematic, and I feel like the characters are very like full. Like they feel. I know, even though they're still light and it's not like there's much more to them, but they have just the right personality for me. So I remember like really liking Monster Blood books when I was a kid, but other than the green liquid out of the can, I legit cannot remember. I couldn't remember anything about that book. So that twist like took me, but like I was reeling. I read this one in like one sitting, and it was just a wild ride from right at the end there. I thought the entirety of the book flowed the best of the three so far that we've done. Like I said, I felt like I could easily see and feel what was happening much more throughout this one. Not that I didn't enjoy the other ones or anything, but this one just felt like it had a little more personality and good side characters, and it felt like there was more events happening. So like no one was lingering on a particular moment or like for like too long or anything like that. And yeah. So what else did I have to say here? This one was a little less like of a horror story, I feel like, and more of like sort of like a creepy mystery thriller almost. I mean, I guess it's got a monster in it and stuff. I mean, monster blood, but I never really know what makes a horror, what makes a thriller and stuff. I mean, I kind of do, but it's fine. I think people use those interchangeably, but I think it was also great that this one wasn't super focused on like time of day, because I love when scary things happen during the daylight. I find that to be like even scarier, because it's like you think everything's going to happen at night, and then when it happens during the day, it's crazy. But yeah, that twist at the end, sending me reeling. Like it came out of left field, out of nowhere, bizarre thing to happen, and you know what? I loved it. I loved it. Like the entire time you're so focused on this monster blood that the other stuff is like happening sort of like around it and feels irrelevant, but then it all comes together at the end and you're almost, like I said, blindsided. And it reminded me a lot of how like WandaVision played out in the end a little with Agatha, and I was 100% here with it, here for it. So there was a lot of iconography I thought I enjoyed as well, from like the creepy toy store to the monster blood can and the goo itself, along with the aunt. Having the aunt deaf was like really interesting because, you know, like when they cried out for help, she couldn't hear them, and having that twist on top of it was nice. So I love that. I kind of love the entire setting of the book. It just felt like I was picturing where and how it could be filmed the entire time, and I just like I want a super creepy version of this to come out so bad. I'm excited to get to those sequels though, because other than the cover with the hamster breaking out of the cage, I can't really remember what happens in any of the other ones. But like I said, at the top of the show, there is a TV episode of this, and it is a little different. There's some interesting choices. Like, first off, the aunt actually isn't deaf, and they just have her like listening to like crazy loud orchestral music at various points. So I think that's how they kind of challenged, like, when they cry for help, they can't hear her. But the great aunt also has a room that Evan isn't supposed to go into, which he does, and she says it's full of scary stuff, and tells Andy about it when he meets her. But I also don't feel like this Andy was as good of a character. Like, she seems awkward, whereas the one in the book I felt like was very sure of herself. Like, it reminded me of Ellie from Up. And yeah, so it was just like I wanted her to be that sort of character. I guess that's what I imagined in my head. But and then when they're in the room, I felt like they were a lot more explicit that the aunt is involved in some sort of witchcraft or magic or something like that. And I get it. I mean, it's a 20-minute episode of a TV show, so you got to kind of move the you got to condense the plot a lot more. So, but they open like a cabinet with vials and other things, and that's where they find the monster blood on the show. And the monster blood's like in a mason jar with a handwritten label on it. I don't know. And then what's weird is they open it, and like Sarah Beth was like trapped in there with it. So the whole idea is like they've unleashed this thing. So Sarah Beth with it, as opposed to like just kind of stumbling into the middle of something that was always going on. So they divide it in half. They put the jar back so the aunt won't know. There's this like funny line in the show though, where like Andy runs out to distract the aunt, and she says she's Andy Evans' friend, and the aunt asks if she's related to the Chicago Evans friends. I thought that was funny. But like the majority of the episode is just the kids trying to contain the monster blood. So the backstory is that in this one is that 30 years ago, the aunt took on Sarah Beth as a boarder and found her practicing dark magic. Sarah Beth stepped into the world's smallest amount of monster blood, and then the aunt sealed the monster blood up in the jar. So it's like the aunt wasn't magic, or was magic. It was weird. Also, like, where did the monster blood come from? Like, did Sarah Beth make it? So, and Trigger did eat the monster blood in the show too, but he ballooned up to the size of a house in this. So he barks outside of the house, and distracts Sarah Beth enough that the monster blood gets her again. And so, and then it cuts to Evan. So this is the crazy part. It cuts to Evan telling these kids the story to a kid on an airplane and saying he's on his way to Atlanta to meet up with his parents. So the kid's like, what happened to the monster blood? They say they sealed it and buried it where no one could find it. And he's like, imagine if you hadn't gotten it all and it was on your clothes or something. So it cuts down to Trigger in the cargo hold of an airplane, which I know is where they used to do this with pets. I don't think they do that anymore. And there's just like monster blood pouring out of the suitcase. And so the next episode is an original episode, like I said, that's not based on the books or story, which is an interesting choice, like monster blood on a plane. So I'd recommend just watching them and watch them together as one. So fun facts about that episode, though, is that the kid who plays Evan is Kyle LeBain, who is brother to Tyler LeBain, and was most recently in the theatrical version of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. So there it is. We have 3 down, 59 to go. Next time we're talking about another classic. I mean, like I said, they're all classics. But this one is, I feel like the next one's a fan favorite. You know, who doesn't know the cover of Say Cheese and Die? Okay. And this does have a TV episode starring one Bebe Ryan Gosling. So I think this is a good one. So that is going to do it for me. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and most importantly, leave some comments so we can talk about the book. I want to know who's reading it, what you all thought of this, or if you just watched the show, what did you think of the episodes of the show? Please let me know. If you are listening, rate and review the podcast, and that helps more people find it, I guess. I don't know how it works. I'm just doing it for fun. I just want everybody out there to find each other and have fun loving these crazy weird books that we loved, and still love. So I also set up an email if anyone wants to get in touch with me. It's letsgetgoosebumps@gmail.com. So the name of the podcast @gmail.com. So thank you for hanging in there, everybody, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.